Don't worry, this might look like a complicated painting, but it's actually easier than you think, and the results are stunning. It does take a little bit of time, but it is so achievable. This even became one of my personal favorite paintings, and I really think you're going to love how yours turns out as well. So what are we waiting for? Let's give this a try. So here I've pulled out my watercolor supplies, my paints, water, a paper towel, and then of course we need some watercolor paper. Now I've chosen to cut mine to be the size 8 by 8 today in sort of a square form. I think this is going to go really well with this particular composition. Now this is a painting that's not as easily done free-handed, so you are going to want some type of outline on your paper. If you'd like, you can try drawing this for yourself, so just pause the video right now and then take a look at what I've got going on here. But if you do prefer to just skip right to the fun of painting, I will have this available in my Etsy shop that you can print right out at home and then simply trace it onto your watercolor paper using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house, and you're all set to paint. Now I've based this flower off of a peony plant that I grow right in my own yard. It's light, it's pink, big and beautiful. I don't have quite as many petals on this one as I do in real life, which is one reason why this is going to be easier than some peonies are to paint. And just as a side note, as you're drawing your outline, you don't necessarily need to draw in all of the little vein lines that you see. Those are just there as a gauge or a guide just to show you how or where to add them in later. All right, next up, we need some brushes. I think I'm going to try pulling out a number 10 round for some of the larger spaces and petals, as well as a number 6 round for some of the smaller areas, and then we'll need a number 1 rigger brush for the vein lines in the end. And just as a side note, these brushes are available and back in stock right now. I will leave a link for these brushes as well as my Etsy shop link in the description of this video, along with links and information for any of the other products you see me using today if you're interested in looking into anything further. All right, so now after we have our outline lightly penciled on our watercolor paper, and having it lightly penciled is key for this piece today, we're going to be painting some fairly light values, and we're not going to want to have those pencil lines showing too much in the end. Then I'm going to go ahead and tape my paper down with some artist tape, just to help a little bit with the warping, as well as give it a bit of a border around this piece. My tape is pretty thin, so I'm going to be doubling up on that to create a slightly thicker border around the edge of the paper. My hope is that it's going to make the flower really pop off the page in the end. If you're wanting to have a border around yours, you're just going to want to make sure to put that tape on nice and straight onto the page. Okay, good enough. Let's get to painting. Let's begin by pulling out a few colors onto our tray for the background. Now you can try whatever colors you like. I'm going to try some burnt umber, and this is very watered down, very light in value. I only need a hint of this color in here. Then I'm going to take some ultramarine blue, and I do have a little bit of dioxazine purple already on my tray that I'm going to mix into just a little bit, but I do want it to be heavier on the blue than the purple. And again, this is going to be very, very watered down. Okay, I'm actually going to change things up here with my brown. I might try adding in a touch of alizarin crimson in here to see what that does. Maybe it'll give it more of a reddish brown hue. And then I may also pull out some pure burnt umber as well. We'll just mix and match these and see how it goes. All right, now using the number 6 round brush, I'm going to take a little bit of water and just paint in this first little background section with water first. And then I'll take a touch of these brown and reddish brown colors and add and blend these colors into this first section. Very good. There is one little triangular shape in this background area right here, and I'll kind of just paint this in the same way. Now over off to the right side far corner, this is a little bit bigger space, but we're going to kind of paint this in the same way that we've just done. I'm going to go ahead and water down the area first, and then I'll add in the color. And this time I'm going to be a little bit more heavy on that reddish brown color. Okay, now we're getting down to the bottom corner. I'm going to put some water in the space first, and then I'll begin by adding in the reddish brown color, a little bit darker and a little bit more heavy, and then I'm going to take some of the blue violet that we mixed up and begin blending those two colors together. I might even get a little bit heavier on the blue right at the very bottom of this area. We've really got a fun transition of background colors going on here. It's actually turning out better than I thought. So let's paint in this last little section. I'm kind of going to do it in the same way as the last one, starting off with some of the reddish brown and then adding in some of the blue violet and finishing off heavier with a pure ultramarine blue at the very base. All right, well done. I actually kind of like how that turned out. Hopefully it will go okay with our peony flower too. While we let that finish drying completely, let's go ahead and get some colors ready on our tray for the flower petals. First, I'm going to pull out some Quinacridone rose. This one's going to be a lighter version, so I'm going to have some extra water in the mix, and there is a tiny bit of purple color already on my tray that I'm mixing into this as well. So this pink color does have a slight purple hint to it. Now, like I said, that first section of color is going to be lighter and more watered down, and then we're going to create a darker shadow version of this color. So I'm going to pull out again some Quinacridone rose and blend it into the purple that's already on my tray. This looks like it might be a mineral violet or maybe Dioxozine purple, but probably any purple would work. I'm going to keep this color more heavily concentrated just to keep it darker in value as well. I think mine looks good enough, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be painting all of these petals using the wet on wet technique. This is going to keep our colors light and soft and help blend and spread the paint better. We're going to start with some of the highlighted parts of the petals first. So these initial ones that we're going to do are extremely light in value. Really, there's not much color to them at all. In fact, I still have some of that pink color in my paintbrush still, and that actually might be enough color for this highlighted section. Now, I might try something here and add just a hint of shadow in this petal by taking a touch of that watered down ultramarine blue that's already on our tray and just add a tiny bit of this off to the left side. All right, let's paint another highlighted section, maybe this one down here, and I'll start with some water first again. Maybe my water is still a little bit tainted pink, but I might have to add in some extra color on this one, especially at the inside of the petal, closest to the center of the flower to create more shadow and dimension. I'll do the same with this section of petal as well. I kind of liked that hint of blue, so I might add in a touch of blue in this one as well. Maybe some light pink if I feel like it needs it. Okay, just a couple more highlighted sections left. I'll paint these two kind of in the same way that we've been doing, with really a light, almost just tinted water, and then adding in a touch of blue or pink to create some shadow or dimension. Just remember to keep everything really light in value right now. We want to create a nice contrast between these petals and then the main petals that we're about to paint. All right, we're actually off to a really good start. That's all of the highlighted petals that we have on the page. We do need these to dry completely before we start painting in the main parts of the petals though. I might even pull out my hairdryer really quickly to speed up that drying process. Now, before we get to painting in some of these larger petals, there is this one little section here from a folded over part of the petal that I'm going to take a touch of the darker pink color and just quickly paint in that little section to create a shadow. All right, I think we're ready to move on now. I'll be painting all of these flower petals using the wet on wet technique. So I will start out first with some water going around the center stamen area that creeps into this section. Then after we have the water layer on here, I'm going to take a touch of the really light, watered down quinacridone rose and paint some tiny, small lines of color to add some texture in here. This is going to blend in a little bit to that water base layer, but we want to start out with some lighter colors first and then work our way to the darker shadows. Now that we basically have our highlighted areas within the petal, it's time to start adding in the darker shadow colors. And we do need to work quickly with all of this before anything starts to dry. We want everything to be able to blend smoothly and softly together. So I'll start by taking some pure quinacridone rose first and just dropping that into the centermost part of the flower petal, going around that stamen area, leaving the end of the petal lighter and more of a highlighted color. Very good. That's a great start. Now to finish this off, we're going to take some of the really dark quinacridone rose mixed with the dioxazine purple and add some dark valued color at the very center part of the petal. That looks pretty good, and it wasn't too hard to do. It might take a minute to get the hang of, but the good news is that all of these petals are actually going to be painted in pretty much that same way. So if you can get this technique down, you are going to be golden with this piece. Now, you are going to notice that I jump around a bit here and there and paint in the petals that are not adjacent to or touching a petal that might still be wet. We don't want them to all blend together. We want to keep them slightly separated. So let's work on this little section while we let that first petal dry, and then we can move on to some of the larger petals. Okay, I'm ready to do this larger petal. I've already got that water base layer on here, so I'm going to go ahead and add in the lighter quinacridone rose, stripes of color, and letting that blend and spread through the petal, and then we'll add the darker versions of these colors. Now, once as we start painting right next to other petals, you might notice that I will paint either a lighter or a darker color than the petal it's sitting right next to, just to help keep them slightly separated. This way they won't all look exactly the same and blend into each other. Another key is to keep these really contrasting values within each petal. I'll usually have the ends lighter in value and make it really nice and dark in the centermost part. But at this point, I'm actually just going to continue on for a little while, painting in several of these petals using that same technique and in the same way. Now, this flower can take some time to do, but it really is easier than it looks initially, mostly because the technique we're using is going to be all the same. The colors are all the same. We're repeating the same process over and over again. If you need to, though, another good thing about this painting is that you can just finish off a section and let it sit. Take a break if you want to, come back to it later, or even a different day if you want to. So now is the time to just sit back, relax, and enjoy the painting process. It's really fun using this wet on wet technique because you're never quite sure how the paint is going to spread or what it's going to do, and this always creates a really fun look. One more side tip before I let you loose. If you find that your petals are starting to dry out and your paint isn't spreading as well, you can just wet and dry your brush off and then use the damp bristles to help spread the paint around a little bit better. I do hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. To be honest, I was a little bit nervous to start this painting. It did look a little bit overwhelming even to me, but I'm telling you, after I got started, it wasn't as bad as I thought, and the end result is really striking. It's actually become one of my favorite paintings I've done here on YouTube, so I'm really glad you're joining me for this today. If you find that you are enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. Okay, great job. This is really coming together so nicely. We only have a few petals left, but with some of these petals that are on this outside edge, I might actually try something a little bit different just to change things up. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work, but let's give it a try. And then you can decide if you want to do this or not. I'm going to take a touch of this really light, watered down ultramarine blue that's already on our tray and just add a tiny bit at the very edges of the petal to create a little bit of shadow look and also change up the color very, very slightly. This blue color actually ends up kind of blending into the pink a little bit, so it does turn more purplish in color. I only did try a little bit this time. I might try adding more blue into some of these others as well, but you can be the judge on if you'd like to give this a try or not. With these last few petals that are left, we're going to be using a little bit more of that darker paint in here since they are underlapping all of these other petals. This is going to create a really nice shadow contrast from the rest of the flower. But you're doing great. We're almost done. Keep it up. Woo! Great job. That was a lot of work, but this really turned out so pretty. I absolutely love this. And we only have a couple of more steps to finish this off and really make this painting pop off the page. And that is to paint in the stamen area and also maybe some vein lines on the petals. So let's work on the stamen first using the number 6 round, and maybe I'll mix together a nice orangey reddish color. Maybe I'll try some of this Gamboge and mix it with a touch of cadmium orange. And this color is nice, but I do feel like it's not quite dark enough. So I'm going to take some cadmium red and add that in there as well. And I might actually pull out some Gamboge and the cadmium orange as well, so we have a highlight color as well as that shadow color. I'll start painting in the stamen area using some of the lighter yellow-orange color first, and I'm just painting these in circles or blob shapes to kind of fill this space in. Okay, now that we have most of that area covered with that lighter yellow-orange, let's take the darker red-orange and add in some dots of color into the stamen while the paint is still a little bit wet and let that blend in. Now we're going to focus this darker color closer to the center part of the flower with maybe a few dots spreading upward to blend it in. That looks pretty good, but I actually feel like we need even darker of a shadow color in there. So I'm going to take some of that Quinacridone rose and Dioxozine purple that we already have on our tray and add in some more really dark dots of color right at the center. Yes, I like that much better. That really finishes that off well. Now, the last thing that we need to do is just paint in a few vein lines within the petals. And actually, this is optional. If you like how your flower looks, just how it is, you can call it done, and that's good enough. Now, we did create some soft lines in here already, but if you would like to add a few extra lines, then you can take your rigger brush, water down some of that pink purplish paint to use, and then to help keep your lines nice and thin, take your brush and slightly dab the very edge of it onto a paper towel, and that's just going to take off some excess paint and water, and this is going to help keep your lines nice and thin. Now make sure that your painting is completely dry before adding these in, and you don't need to have very many of these. They can be fairly subtle, and it might be a good idea to go ahead and follow some of the lines that you already have sort of formed within the petal so it looks more natural. You also don't need a lot of these. Sometimes less is more on a piece like this. You really don't want to detract from the main focus of the painting. In fact, I don't think I'm even going to do this on every single petal, maybe just some of the larger ones that are more of the focus. All right, well done. Now, one last thing that you can do is take a good eraser and erase any pencil lines that might be showing on your painting. Sometimes they come off, sometimes they don't. At the very least, you can usually lighten them a little bit. Just make sure that your painting is completely dry before doing this. You don't want to accidentally smear or smudge your painting after all the hard work you've put in. But I think that's actually it for this piece. Let's see the final reveal after we take the tape off. Hopefully we have a nice clean white border around the edge to really set this painting off. Ugh, didn't this turn out so beautiful? I really love this painting. I hope you're going to give it a try. I think that you'll be surprised by your results. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.